hope everyone had a good week. We have a very fine program for you today, but before I introduce our guests, let me make a few comments. This will be about our donor program that all of you know we've initiated here at Green Spring. We have added to the program since we last talked about it, and that the executive director has said that all employees will also participate in the program. So it's really a wonderful thing because we can end up having a little over 3,000 people that, if we get 100%, well, that'd be marvelous. But anyway, that's where we are, and we're all looking forward to it. Now, we have our first person I'm going to introduce is sort of like an old friend because he's been around here now. It's John Ogden. And John, welcome to the program. And
thank you very much for having me again.
Thank you for coming back, and I'll let you introduce our guests there if you would.
Sure thing.
Then we get going.
I'd be pleased to, yes. To my left, we have Bobby Leahy, and she is a kidney transplant recipient. She received her kidney back in 2004, and she can talk more about that.
Yeah.
And then to her left, we have Ken Ivey. He is a donor father. His daughter, Erin, became a donor when she passed away just a couple of years ago, and he'll also, of course, tell his story.
Okay. Well, Ken, if you don't mind, why don't we start with you and just sort of tell us what led up to it. Had she been a donor? Just lead us through it a little bit.
Well, Erin was 14 years old, so she was not, did not have her driver's license, so she didn't have the opportunity to check the little organ donation box on your license. And that's actually an issue with people, minors, because that's usually a question that never comes up. It's a question that parents never want to even think about. But what basically back in 2008, Thanksgiving Day, we had a tradition of going up to the mountains with some good friends of ours. And so we all go up, and their kids and our kids are all the same age, and way up in the mountains on the other side of Winchester. And they have a pond with a rope swing. And so it was a Thanksgiving Day, so it was a little chilly, but they decided to get 5 children on the rope at the same time and start swinging. Well, it wasn't a limb that it was tied to, it was actually a tree that was overhanging. And obviously, the tree snapped, and it fell, and all the children went into the water. In fact, Erin, my daughter's 14, was on it, as well as my other daughter, youngest daughter, who was 12 at the time, was on it. And it missed all the other children except it struck Erin in the back of the head. Yeah. And she basically fell into the water. And then I heard the crack from the cabin, and I ran out and had to carry her out of the water. And I am actually a former EMT in Loudoun County, so I have some medical training.
Yeah.
And we're way up in the mountains. And so she still had a heartbeat, but was not breathing. So I did rescue breathing for her for about an hour before the emergency people could get there and get her medevaced out to Fairfax. And then once we did that, we got to Fairfax, and then it was the typical, her heart was still beating, and we're, my wife and I are, praying earnestly that, she can survive. And there's a whole process that goes on once somebody is in that condition. And that's right where really this whole process began, because it was fairly obvious she had no brain activity, and she was in perfect, immaculate health.
Yeah, a young person.
And so that's when, we began to realize that, something, bad's going to happen here. And even though I have been an EMT for years, and I've always been an advocate for organ donations, never in my entire life have I even thought of the possibility of one of my children being a donor.
Yeah, I bet.
And quite honestly, the first thought that comes into your mind, or it did mine and my entire family's, is no, you're not going to touch my child, my precious little baby.
Yeah.
And but then, you start thinking about it. And Erin was an incredible child. She the most giving individual you ever want to meet in your life. She wanted to be a neonatal nurse when she grew up, and she was just the most loving, caring little girl. In fact, on that, her school, after her death, created an annual award called the Heart of Gold Award. That's to be given out every year.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
so it's going to be in her name. But so at the hospital, that's when we first started having an interaction with the WRTC, which is the local organization that handles all the transplants in this area.
Yeah, that's who John is
And that's John
associated
is with.
Now, did they approach you, or did you approach them, or was it sort of a combined thing?
No, they definitely approach you. They certainly see it every day. They see the indications of a possible person that could become a donor.
Yeah.
And then they are, it's a very delicate situation.
Oh, it had to be.
And, I really commend them for how they handled it, because, it's something I don't think I would want to do, to approach a parent of someone who just, lost a child or a spouse or a loved one. It's very difficult. And then when our first reaction was, no, they were great. They were like, no problem. And, but then that's when I believe, I started to get moved and started thinking. And then we actually had a family meeting at the hospital. And I started talking to the family saying, this is really what Aaron would want. And we need to start thinking, not about ourselves. And because just as we were praying for some type of miracle, as it turned out, there were 7 other people that were praying for miracles that day. A little boy up in New England had 12 hours. And I can imagine his family praying for a miracle. And a little boy down in Tennessee, same age as Aaron, praying for a miracle, needed a new heart. And so Aaron was the answer to those prayers.
7?
So 7 people.
God, that has to be extremely unusual, isn't it, John? That many?
Yeah, they said that was what they referred to as a full donor. And so not only did she save 7 lives with organs through tissue and bone donation, we still don't know how many that have been saved. We actually received correspondence from these individuals, and we've actually had the privilege of meeting 2 of the recipients.
Oh, really?
We met the little boy who received her heart, and we met the little toddler girl who received one half of her liver.
Oh,
And so that was quite a blessing as well. And
it had to
and actually, my youngest daughter still keeps now in contact with
Really?
the boy who received her heart. So it's really fascinating.
No, it's such a tragedy, but then what came out of it is such a, you have to use a marvelous, wonderful thing that you've given 7 other people, and she has to be looking down on that, if you believe in a God at all, what she's actually done given all the circumstances there.
Yeah, it's actually, and some people will actually question, is this the proper thing to do? And just being a Christian, I know, for example, that it's a perfect picture of Christianity, because Christ gave his life so others may live.
Yeah.
Erin was not a Christ, but she certainly gave her life. Now others lived as well. So it was really, really remarkable. We're still staying in contact, through writing back and forth with some of the recipients, and it's been just remarkable. And it certainly doesn't make the pain go away, but it kind of helps. I equate it with, she basically in my books is a Medal of Honor winner.
Yeah.
If a soldier goes off to war and saves the lives of 7 of his buddies and frees from captivity, 50 people, he's going to come home and he's going to win the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
Well, in my books, that's what Aaron did, and that's what every donor does. Is they're a Medal of Honor winner. They have the ultimate sacrifice. I call it Aaron's ultimate gifts.
Yes.
But the process was great, as great as it could be. They sit down with you, and there's actually a lot of choices that me as a donor parent had. We could designate or determine which parts would be, donated, which would not. There's a big misconception out there. Actually, there's quite a few misconceptions out there about organ donations, and it's a shame.
Is. Well, that's one reason we wanted you here.
Yeah, it's not anything like any TV show you've ever seen. It's quite the opposite. But we actually had the ability to designate one of Aaron's kidneys. We knew of somebody that needed a kidney, so we could say.
Well, I was going to ask you that. So you did have that ability. So if you had someone that, like another family member, you could designate.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a family member. It can just be anybody that you know.
Yeah.
And if by chance that person was not an exact match, it would have been okay that Aaron's kidney would have gone to somebody else, but that person would have been brought to the top of the list.
Yeah.
So that was really great to be able to do that.
Ken, another question that arises, and once again, we really appreciate your coming here because it's got to be painful. I don't care how many years pass, it's got to be. But the question arises fairly frequently since I've gotten involved in this about the state of the body after you give donations. I mean, can you still have a normal burial, that kind of thing? Tell us a little bit about that.
We were very concerned about that because, that's, again, this is your loved one. You don't want, in your mind, you think horrific thoughts.
Yeah.
But the reality is we had an open casket funeral, and there was absolutely nothing you could tell.
Yeah.
In fact, Aaron also gave the gift of sight to an individual down in Southern Virginia.
Really?
And even with that, there was nothing. You could not tell a bit.
Yeah.
So, if anybody has any fears about that, it's just not true.
Not there.
And I think the other big fallacy that people have, or big concern that TV promotes, is that if somebody gets hurt or injured and they go to the hospital, the doctors are going to, oh, we have a possible donor here. Let's try to kill him off.
Yeah.
And that couldn't be farthest from the truth. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Because if a doctor really had that view, you actually have to maintain that person alive.
Yeah.
And so there would be more of an influence to keep them alive than the other. That's just one of the fallacies.
Yeah. No, that's on the list that John gave me. That's one of the questions that apparently arises fairly frequently.
Yeah.
I guess people just think that way. You can't stop them.
And it's because that's what the media,
Yeah.
portrays.
Probably.
That's what's out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, John, thank you. We'll get back to you, Ken. But Bobby, how about give us your story now? You're a recipient, and I'd like for you to start out how did it all start with you? I mean, obviously you had a kidney problem, but then what? No, okay.
This is just a really strange story, and I
Okay.
feel very humbled after listening to a donor family.
Yeah.
I always do. Oh gosh, because it's the greatest gift that can ever be given. I was just merrily passing through my life about 11 years ago, and I got up on the 4th of July, and it was hot, and I thought, oh my goodness, I don't feel really good. And so I went through the day, and we had activities planned with our family. And the next day, I was a little bit sicker, but not anything that was going to stop me because I had never been sick in my life. So my day started, and I didn't feel very good, but I just kept going. And that went on for 2 months. I just thought maybe I had the flu, maybe I just had been working too hard, maybe I was burned out from my work. I was a managing broker with a local real estate company, and spent long hours in the real estate business. Truly, until Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, I did not know that I was really, really sick.
What year was this?
1999. And so at that point in time, on Tuesday afternoon, a client called, and I was absolutely incoherent when I spoke with them.
Really?
And my husband, who happened to be standing there, said, "Bobby, you're going to the doctor." And I said, "No, I'm not. I don't ever go to the doctor. Don't have to go to the doctor." And so I didn't come home. I went to the doctor and woke up in Fair Oaks Hospital. And there were all sorts of strange machines around me and needles in my arm, and things were happening, and doctors I'd never seen before were peering at me. And the next morning, when I felt much better, not understanding I'd been on dialysis for close to 24 hours. The doctor came in and he introduced himself, said he was a nephrologist, and he said, "You've lost your kidneys." And he said, "I
Really?
hate to tell you that." And he said, "We don't know why." He said, "We're not going to biopsy them because they're just simply not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not screening out the toxins in your body." Well, if you've not been sick, you don't realize the import of what he has just said to you. And in my case, I thought, well, that means I rest for a while and I get up and do these things. And he looked at me and he said, "We're going to put you on dialysis starting Thursday." So I went to visit a dialysis center at Tyson's Corner. The most phenomenal caregivers ever, ever, ever. I was fortunate. I could have stayed on dialysis for a long, long time. I was on dialysis for 4.5 years, and then I started getting calls, and most recipients get 3 or 4 calls from their transplant centers, alerting them to the fact that they may be a secondary recipient, or we're expecting a kidney from another location. It's yours. Maybe the kidney didn't arrive, or it wasn't the type of kidney the doctor
let me
wanted to
interrupt
use.
you there. Did you register right after with someone?
Absolutely.
Okay, you did that right after you got out of the hospital.
I was registered and put on the list before I got out of the hospital.
yeah,
It just
yeah,
was that fast.
Did the hospital approach you on that, or were you the
The
initiator?
nephrologist. No, the nephrologist, because
Okay.
I was still in Never Never Land about
Yeah.
what this was. I just really had no
So
concept.
the system really kicked in right away.
The system kicked
Yeah,
right
okay.
in,
Yeah.
and so I was directed right to a dialysis center, and all of my records were already there, and I began the process of being a dialysis patient. 3 hours, 3 times a week, 3 hours a day, 3 times a week, and went through that, did very well. I was tremendously compliant. It's very important for someone who loses kidneys and any organ to be compliant and do exactly as
What
they're
they
told to
ask.
do, which meant I drank about 12 ounces of liquid a day, and I had no salt. I had a little piece of meat like this at dinner. I ate some vegetables. There were nutritionists who worked without the diets of all of us, and I just said, I'm going to do this because I'm not giving up yet. And then, as I said, the calls started to come. And one Saturday morning, I was at 6 o'clock at dialysis, and my
Now, when you
husband.
say calls started to come, was this from John's outfit, or?
No, they were actually coming from Fairfax, Nova Fairfax, which is where I was going to be transplanted. That was the center where
okay.
I was going, the same center that Aaron was involved with.
Yeah.
And the transplant coordinators start calling you. I don't see this side at all as the recipient. They've done all their things behind, and they found
Yeah.
this wonderful donor for me. So when the call came on that Saturday morning from my transplant coordinator, with whom I've been working, I had to go in and have my blood work done regularly, and they had to be sure I was a healthy person. He said, "Stay on dialysis and then come on over to the hospital." And in my own way, I said, "I've heard that before." And he said, "I think you'd better come this time, for sure." And so, not that I didn't before, but it was sort of like, you've called me 4 times now, and things, I've been in the operating room and things have not happened. But I did get to the hospital, and I arrived at the hospital at 2 o'clock, and at 5:30 I was back in my room with a functioning kidney that started on the operating room table, has not stopped since, and my donor was 70 years old. She was a retired nurse who always knew that she was going to be a donor. And so the family moved quickly with John's group to make the donation, and she was a marvelous person. Immediately, within weeks, I was in touch with the donor family and having dinner with Earl, Winona's husband, and we meet and see each other all the time.
That's,
She was so healthy. She had a brain aneurysm, but she was so healthy that she, like Aaron, even at her age, was able to donate a lot of her
Well, let
organs.
me interrupt that because that's something that has really come up here because, you know, we're seniors around here and we're in our 80s, most of us. And John's folks have told us, you know, age is really not the determining factor.
That's exactly right.
What's the determining factor if the organ is functioning?
That's
forth.
right.
And certainly
That's
you
right.
found that out, so you have a
Oh.
70-year-old organ in you.
I do, I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
Well,
so-
77 now, or
Yeah, right.
about, I guess. I can say it's older than me, but not much.
You're aging very gracefully.
Oh, thank you.
As is her kidney.
As is my
Yeah, the
kidney.
kidney, right, thank you.
And
Now,
I
go
do take
ahead, I
care of it.
interrupted you there.
Well,
Why don't
and
you
I
get
do
that?
take very good care of my kidney because I feel a very deep responsibility to house this kidney and ensure that
Yeah.
it has the longest possible life it can. Part of that's because I will live longer,
Sure.
but a lot of it has to do with this marvelous family that so willingly gave.
Yeah,
And it's an amazing thing.
and you've kept in touch with them.
Yes, yes. They come. My donor's husband has since remarried. He has a lovely wife who looks exactly like my donor, and they've known the two women had known each other for a long, long time, and they're all members of the same church in Maryland, and so we come back and forth all the time to have dinner, and he brings me flowers from Winona's garden, and they're great,
Yeah.
big blooms, and it's just so nice. They've become very good friends. He emails regularly and sends me jokes, and we just have a nice time.
Yeah, that's marvelous.
It's great to have an extended family.
Yeah,
it's marvelous.
It really is. Yeah. John, you want to add anything here that you can?
Sure.
Are these? I guess certainly Ken's case is somewhat unusual, isn't it?
It is, yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of it has to do with the fact that his daughter Erin was in optimal health, which is why she was able to donate so many organs and also tissues. But it's also important to know through Bobby's experience, as she said, that her donor was advanced in age. And that's something that
That's
is
a nice way of putting
no,
it.
well, I learn a lot from you.
Our viewers will enjoy that.
Well, it's true.
Yeah,
and she, her donor was able to donate kidney. Was she able to donate much else? Do you know?
She did. She donated tissue,
Okay.
bone,
Okay.
ligaments, and skin.
There are so many things and we were talking about this before the show started, but there are so many things that medical science has allowed us to do. It's allowed us to not only receive these wonderful organs, but also to donate a number of things like tissue that you normally wouldn't think of when it comes to organ donation.
Yeah.
When you check that box to become an organ donor, you don't necessarily think that it could be bone for use in bone grafts or bone surgeries, or skin to prevent burn victims from losing fluid in their burns and from really saving their lives, or even corneas for people who need cornea transplants. You don't think of all those things. We often think of hearts and lungs and kidneys, but you don't often think of the number of other things that an individual can donate. And we have recovered successfully a number of not only organs but tissues from people who are older.
Yeah. Now, when people have when they designate on their driver's license, does that also indicate that you can take tissue from there? Or
Yes, it does.
Somewhere I heard that wasn't true, but it's anything actually. Then.
It's anything. As a matter of fact, if you've registered through either the DMV or through a paper registration form, it basically covers everything, dependent upon, of course, the medical professionals, looking at you and seeing what you can donate. Obviously, they're going to run tests and they're going to run all of these things that will determine whether or not some things are viable. So when you register, it basically says, everything is available for transplant, but what is recovered for transplant is dependent upon the medical professional's decisions.
Yeah. Let me something else. I don't want to be crass about this, but the expense factor.
Mm-hmm.
How is that handled? Like in Bobby's case, would her insurance cover this, or how's that handled?
That's a very good question.
And then in Ken's instance also.
Sure. From the donor's perspective, it doesn't cost anything.
Okay.
And Ken can speak a little bit to that.
From the time you say that you will agree to be a donor, the billing stops
Yeah.
for you, and it completely is taken over by the WRTC.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there-
that's reasonable, yeah. it
Yeah.
would be.
The cost is
Pretty-
passed on to the recipient. That's how it works.
Okay. And does the insurance company usually, they cover
They
that?
do cover it.
Yeah.
They were very good, in fact. They worked very closely with the hospital. There was never any question
Yeah.
that I was going to have. I never paid a thing. The insurance took care of everything.
Yeah. Well, it's a marvelous program. We're down to about 3 minutes. John, how do we have any rough figures? How many people do we actually have registered? Here in this area, as exact.
That's a very good
and
question.
Something that's frustrating us, and maybe you folks have got an idea. We really don't know here at Green Spring how many are registered.
Yep.
And we get into that privacy issue. You know, I'm not going to go up and we can't go up and ask people.
Yep.
And we're thinking maybe of sending out a notice to everyone where they don't have to sign their name and just maybe check a box or something. Because we'd really like to know if we're successful in getting
Yep.
people to sign up.
Yep.
But what, any suggestions from any of the three of you? Or what? Go ahead.
Well, I can just speak to the number of people who are registered.
Yeah, we do that.
In the United States, we're about to hit a milestone. We're about to hit our 100 millionth registered donor from across the country.
Really?
In the Virginia area, in the state of Virginia, I should say, approximately 55% of those over the age of 18 have registered themselves, have designated themselves as organ and tissue donors. In Maryland, it's approximately 45%. And in the District of Columbia, it's a little bit lower. It's about 36%. So we're making inroads. Virginia, obviously, is a model because they've got more than half of the citizens have registered, but we're still
Really?
trying to make inroads. And with the help of folks like Ken and Bobby, I can talk until I'm blue in the face about organ and tissue donation.
No,
but
but
it
people
really,
like you, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to start an initiative to sign up minors because right now there's currently no system in place for that. And trying to get it so that same box that's on your driver's license would be on your Social Security card. And when do you get your Social Security card? You get it at birth. So that would do two things. It would give more possible donors, but it also asks the question to the parents at that time instead of during a tragedy. And they can certainly choose not to check the box,
Yeah.
but at least you're asking the question.
Yeah. But Ken, you were never questioned when you and your wife made the decision that what you would do. Did anyone question you about the legality of it, anything like that?
Oh, no.
Yeah,
No.
it was just automatic, more or less.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
once the decision was made, and then you had the option, as a minor, with my daughter being a minor,
Yeah.
that we could actually select the parts that would be donated and would not
Yeah.
be.
Very good. Well, very fine. Any last words? I don't run off, but we'll close it. John, anything that...
You know what? I would just like to thank both Bobby and Ken for coming out today. This is a big help for us.
I would want to thank you also very much for all of our Green Spring community here. I'm sure we're gonna get nothing but thanks for you folks coming out here because you really opened our eyes on it. It's just great that you were willing to do that, and we appreciate it very much. So don't run away a minute. We have some closing comments here to make.